Welcome to Reading the Gospels Together, and today we're on part 2 of John chapter 5. When last we met, we were visiting the pools of Bethesda, where Jesus has just healed a man who'd been an invalid for 38 long, lonely years. Now, you might recall that Jesus is in Jerusalem for one of the annual religious feast days, so the city and the pools of Bethesda would be crowded. John tells us as much in verse 13. Now, we often think of these events as happening in isolation, but the pools were a busy spot, and while not many people would have paid much attention to the conversation between Jesus and the invalid, you can bet that the healing caused quite a stir. The commotion attracted the attention of the religious officials supervising the ritual bathing. Astonishingly, they take the healed man to task for carrying his mat. Now, this seems strange and deeply unreasonable to our ears, but remember, the Judaism of the first century was deeply concerned with maintaining proper observance of Jewish ceremonial and religious law. Perhaps the most widely observed and important of these laws was maintaining respect for the Sabbath, the day of rest. No work was to be done on the Sabbath, a law which even the Romans allowed the Jews to observe, not demanding that Jewish employees or even Jewish slaves would work on the Sabbath. And while carrying your mat might not seem like a big deal to us, it was strictly forbidden there and then at a particularly religious site on a particularly religious day on the Sabbath. Now, before you get too upset at the seeming callousness of this law, I've got a story for you. In respect of Sunday, I don't do things such as mowing the lawn to preserve the peace and sanctity of the day, but about 12 years or so ago, I got home from church one summer Sunday, the car already packed, the family ready to leave on our vacation, bracing for the 15-hour drive to see family in Ontario. It had rained pretty steadily for days, but it was finally sunny. The grass badly needed cutting, and here we were going away for 10 days, so I decided to give it a quick cut before we left, to save returning to a jungle and 1.5 foot long grass. It's the first time I'd mow the lawn on a Sunday for more than 20 years. Now, by the time we got to Ontario and I checked my email, I had 3 very stern letters from members of my congregation, all expressing disappointment and concern that I had been observed mowing my lawn on a Sunday. Now, only one of these people had seen me, of course, but the word had spread. I had to make humble apologies to each one. And it is in that very spirit that the healed man is taken to task for carrying his mat. Listen to John's words. The day on which this took place was a Sabbath, and so the Jewish leaders said to the man who'd been healed, "It's the Sabbath. The law forbids you to carry your mat." But he replied, "The man who made me well said to me, 'Pick up your mat and walk.' So they asked him, 'Who is this fellow that told you to pick it up and walk?' The man who was healed had no idea who it was, for Jesus had slipped away into the crowd that was there." So much going on in those few lines, but here's something that amazes me. The man had no idea who Jesus was. 38 years an invalid, suddenly he's miraculously cured, and the man has no idea who, how, or why. At no point had the man done anything but complain. We hear no expression of faith or trust or belief. Jesus simply, as an act of compassion, healed the man and then slipped away into the crowd, we read, choosing to not make this a confrontation with the temple officials who would have taken Jesus to task for performing a healing on the Sabbath, as they had done elsewhere. Well, now we hear another loaded verse. Later, Jesus found the man at the temple and said to him, "See, you're well again. Stop sinning, or something worse may happen to you." The man went away and told the Jewish leaders that it was Jesus who'd made him well. No, Jesus, it appears, sought the man out, finding him among the crowd of thousands at the temple, and he warns the man to stop sinning, or something worse might happen to you. What on earth is going on? What is the man doing that is sinful? What could he possibly have done in his limited state? And here was Jesus, in warning the man, referring to as running afoul of the religious authorities. Was that what the something worse was? You better watch out what you do, otherwise these authorities will be all over you. Is that what Jesus was saying? I'm afraid it remains for me a mystery. what the man does once discovering it was Jesus who healed him is immediately go to the authorities to tell them it was Jesus. Now, it's difficult to say whether this was the man acting in tribute to Jesus, giving Jesus credit, or was it simply to get himself out of trouble? Did the religious authorities say to him, now, if you find out who did this, come and tell us as soon as you can, because we need to talk to that guy. Again, it's a mystery. We do know, however, that it sparks a controversy between Jesus and the authorities, as the next verse says. So because Jesus was doing these things on the Sabbath, the Jewish leaders began to persecute him. In his defense, Jesus said to them, my Father is always at his work to this very day. I too am working. For this reason, they tried all the more to kill him. Not only was he breaking the Sabbath, but he was even calling God his own Father, making himself equal with God. Now, let's take the part of the Jewish leaders here. Their job is to maintain peace and order within the religious community, which includes adherence to traditional religious laws and beliefs. The central Jewish confession of faith, known as the Shema Israel, is, Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God, the Lord is one. To claim, as Jesus did, that God is his Father, a phrase that we're very used to, but which was dangerous and new to the Jews, was no less than serious blasphemy. And not only did Jesus heal on the Sabbath, an act considered work, but he told the fellow he had healed to pick up his mat and go, counseling another Sabbath violation. But from Jesus' point of view, acts of mercy and compassion are not only allowable on the Sabbath, but appropriate, as they reflect the mercy and compassion of God. Jesus is doing nothing other than revealing the true nature of God through his actions. After all, he says in his speech in verses 16 to 30, if God wasn't approving his actions, he could do nothing anyway, as it is God working through him. Even the resurrection itself will be enacted through the work of the Son of God and the power of God working through him. Besides which, says Jesus, Moses, by which he means the Old Testament, foresees and foretells the coming of the Messiah, the Son of God. You diligently study the scriptures, Jesus says. How do you not see that they refer to me? And aren't the miracles you're hearing about also giving you a clue? If you don't believe the Bible, he says, how will you ever believe in me? Now, the speech Jesus makes in verses 31 through 46 are very important to me and to how I do ministry. You might wonder why I devote so much of my ministry to Bible study. Even my preaching has a strong teaching component. It's precisely because of this point that Jesus is making. If we do not know, study, and have confidence in the reliability and the truth of the scriptures, how will we ever come to a strong faith in Jesus? I've always believed that the more we know and understand about the Bible, the more we will know and understand about Jesus, and that we'll grow our faith in him and serve him with confident joy. That's why we're doing these studies. Now, next time in chapter 6, Jesus feeds the 5,000, walks on water, and then loses most of his following, all in a single chapter. Together, we'll find out why. In the meantime, keep studying diligently, and we'll see you then.